heavy in content. There's a lot of information I'm going to be giving you. Making notes, asking questions is critical. Okay, so please pay attention and be ready to engage. So for this assignment, you're going to need your your portraits. By the way, enjoyed looking at your portraits. I had a lot of fun. I hope you did too. But for this project, you're going to use one of your portraits. I want you to select. And I just want to point out that if you double click on your portrait, it's going to open up in what's called preview. And so what I want you to do is I want you to find a portrait you want to work with, and I want you to open it up in Photoshop. Okay? And I want to also make a point to you, when you're working with me in any of my classes, I always want you to, this is the original file, I never want you to write over your original file. I always want you to do save as and to save generations of the same file, so that if we need to, so that turns into that turns into that can turn into that. So if I need to go back to a file to create a new file, I can do that. But you always have generations of files, and you don't overwrite your original file. Is that clear? So I'm going to be doing some of that today to show you what I mean by that. So this is our original file, or our native file, and it usually has some kind of really odd name that isn't really identifiable. That's okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is save as, and I'm going to save it on my computer, and I'm going to save it on my desktop, and I'm going to create a new folder for all of my files, and I'll call this folder Portrait, because I did Portrait before, Portrait 2, folder, and then this is my color image or color portrait. Save it as a Photoshop file and put it in there, okay? So we saved the file as what it is. It's in Photoshop. We're ready to manipulate it now. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Image, and I'm going to go to Mode, and I'm going to change the color mode from RGB to grayscale and discard the color. So now I have my portrait in grayscale. And of course, since I've changed it, I'm going to do a save as and call this color portrait GS in Photoshop, as a Photoshop file, and GS for grayscale. Okay? And I'm going to save that. So far, so good? So you see how I'm saving these generational image files, so that if I want to go back to the original, I can. It's untouched, but I'm manipulating it and doing lots of things to it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to crop this, and I'll select my crop tool, and up here on your ribbon above, you have what's called ratio. And the ratio that I want you to select, this is on the ribbon, not on the menu bar. The ratio I want you to select is 1:1 square. And you'll see that your crop box turns into a square, all right? And if I scale the crop box, it maintains the square image, the square shape, okay? Which is what I want. And because I'm such a stickler about composition, I'm gonna move this so that I get a good negative, positive composition. I like that. Double click, there's my crop, okay? And I cropped it because I really like this negative shape here, I really like this negative shape here. I love this composition. I think this is a really good composition, okay? So what am I gonna do now? I'm gonna save as, and I'm going to save it as GS grayscale square. Got it? And save it as a Photoshop file. So keep going, right? All right, so we have this file. Remember our value scale that we did? You made a 15-step value scale from 0 to 100, but we also have on value scale, we have the number 0 to 100, correct? You made 15 steps, but the reality is we have 100 steps, correct? So from 0 to 100, if I wanted to create a composition in value as a high contrast value, palette, what numbers would I be looking at to get the highest contrast in terms of the value scale? What numbers could I use?
100 and 0.
100 and 0, black and white. That is the highest contrast we can get, correct? Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to manipulate this photograph to make it a high contrast image. Meaning we're going to try to get as close to, we're going to, find lots of white and lots of black so it has a high contrast, okay? To do that, I'm going to go to Image and Adjustments, and I'm going to select Brightness and Contrast. And it gives me a slider, and with that slider, I'm going to shift the brightness over. And then the contrast, I want to increase the contrast. Let's see if I can do it the other way. No. Yeah, I'm going to do that because I want to keep some of that dark in there. It's really, I want to keep pushing it, so I tell it okay. And I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, Brightness, and Contrast again. And I'm continuing to push the value palette. And go again, brightness and contrast. And I'm looking at my image as I'm doing this. Beautiful. Beautiful. Right there. Okay. Now, I do have some grays in here, but for the most part, I've got a majority of black and white, high contrast image. Would you agree? Good. So we're going to save this file, Shift Command S, save, and this time I'm going to call the file high contrast. And instead of saving Photoshop, I'm going to save it as a JPEG file. Because I'm going to use this for my homework, okay? Tell it okay, and tell it okay. All right, cool. One down, more to go. So I'm going to close this file, and then I'm going to open back up my Photoshop back to this. Do you see why I saved the generations? Okay. And this time, so again, look at me up here. We have our value scale 0 to 100. Now I want to do a low contrast image. What numbers might represent a low contrast palette? Take a guess.
40, 60.
40, let's go even lower. 40, 50, right? Or 80, 90, right? Or 10, 20, or 10, 25, right? Because the numbers are close to each other, they create a low contrast. So now what I want to do is I want to do a low contrast image of this. And remember, you've got the entire scale, a value scale of keys to work with. So it really doesn't matter if you do it in high key, in middle key, or in low key, just as long as the contrast is low. So again, I'm going to go to Adjustments, Brightness and Contrast, and I'm going to lower the contrast. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's really low, right? No, it's not a beautiful image, but it is a low contrast image. And I've got some middle keys in here, but for the most part, it's pretty low in key. Actually, let me make it even muddier. Hold on one sec. So low contrast composition, I'm actually not really thrilled with that. I'll leave it like that. That's really super low contrast. And I'm going to do a file save as, save on your computer. And I'm going to call this low contrast. Don't save it as a Photoshop. Save it as a JPEG file. And save. Okay. Close that and open up your Square again. Back to that. Do you see where I'm going with this? Okay. Next step. Once you have all of the variations of your photographs that I'll outline for you, what you're going to do is you're going to import them into Illustrator, and you're going to create what's called a composite. And I'll create it for you right now. I do want to point out that when working with Photoshop, some of you have a great deal of experience with it. The thing about Photoshop is there's lots of different ways to achieve this effect. Just because I use the adjustment tool, you could use whatever tools you want. If you're not familiar with Photoshop, use the adjustment tool, you're fine. And you could keep using the adjustment tool to keep pushing the palette. But if you have other ways, curves and filters, curves and levels, and you're welcome to use them. Photoshop is a remarkable program that allows you many different options for being able to get to achieve different effects. Okay? So once you've got all of your variations created, then what I want you to do is open up Adobe Illustrator. And you're going to open up a new file in Illustrator, 8.5 by 11, one artboard. Do it in RGB and create. And then what you're going to do is you are going to bring in your images. What was the first one I did? High contrast. Here's high contrast. Oops, wrong file. Hold on, that was from today. PNG and port 2. High contrast, JPEG. And there's our, whoa, look at how big he is. That's okay. So we're going to scale him down. And I am then going to get text and put in high contrast and line it up. And then I'm going to go get the next image. Here's low contrast. Oops, big. Scale it down. I like to make, oh, that may be too low because I could barely see it. I probably might go back and adjust it. Copy that and call it low contrast. Got it? And I'm sizing them so they all fit on the page, okay? Let me tell you the variations for your composite. So here is your artboard, 8.5 by 11. I want photo A, B, C, and D is larger. Oops. A, B, C, and D. All right? A should be high contrast. B should be low contrast. C, one of two. I'm gonna give you the two options, okay? It should be a middle high or middle low. What I mean by that is, again, if you take your value scale, identify middle key, go to low, or middle key, go to high. Got it? Okay? And then F, or D, is full palette. Okay? And what I mean by that is, in all of these examples, you're isolating the value keys. In the first one, it's black and white. In the second one, it's close proximity of numbers. In the third one, it's middle to the high or middle to the low. In the fourth one, it's all of the keys together. It's a rich palette. Got it? You're looking confused.
Yeah.
You're looking confused. Should I do it again? No. Is it the last one you're confused with? Okay. The last one has a full representation of all values. It has whites and high, and middle keys and middle low and middle and low keys. It's a full grayscale palette. Does that make sense?
It's the grayscale image.
It's a grayscale image.
Okay.
With all of the values represented in it.
Okay.
So we might need to tweak the original one to get,
Ever so slightly. You know, when I said, when I am looking at
okay.
your photographs, I'm looking for, that's what I'm looking for, is I'm looking in color. I'm using my Superman vision to not see color and to see value, to make sure you're going to have a good range of values when you select it. Some of you are going to have more issues because some of the photographs may be a little muddy and you're not going to be able to pull them. So you're going to find yourself having to tweak it a lot. Okay? Does that make sense now?
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Anything else? This is called composite. It is due Wednesday before class.
Mm-hmm.
And you are going to present it this way. Now, I did not tell you what size this is, just as long as they fit on the page. I'm comfortable. Yes, and so long as this big one is the biggest one. So,
Just to repeat, what is the size of the artboard for Illustrator?
8.5 by 11.
8.5 by 11, okay.
Yes, sir. What else? You save it as an AI file, you turn it in as a low-res PDF. Okay? Good? Happy? Want more homework? You do. Because you don't feel challenged enough? Really? That's it, guys. I'll see you on Wednesday. Thank you.